Now, here's where I think some of the more immediate limitations that come to my mind arise. On the one hand, it seems insufficient or inadequate to view something like the legalization or the decriminalization of it, right? To prevent more harm being done and possibly some restoration of like, families, things like that. It's hard for me to view that on the one hand, and on the other hand, ignore how the drug trafficking system in Mexico specifically over the last 30 years has led to incredible amounts of corruption, violence,
no doubt,
and devastation to communities where innocent bystanders, right, people who are just trying to farm or do whatever their livelihood is in their communities are absolutely getting devastated through the drug kingpin competitors who are laying waste and taking domination of that. So I think that I'm hard pressed to ignore that. To say, on the one hand, hey, look, we can help so many people flourish if we stop throwing them in jail for lighting, blazing it up. And on the other hand, I'm like, no, dude, but like people are getting their heads cut off over this unregulated, out of control, violent cycle, right?
Yeah. So the idea becomes, well, if we legalize it nationally, right, like on a federal level, what happens to the cartel's market, right?
Exactly.
I mean, does it go by the wayside there? I don't know. I mean, certainly cartels will always exist, and they'll probably just shift from marijuana to cocaine or whatever is most profitable, right, in kind of the next sector.
Yeah.
And so you'll see people take it as far as like, no, we just need to legalize all drugs and just go, again, full hog on the situation. It's like, that feels a little, it feels a little much, right? Certainly there. But the idea is, how do we compete with both of those? Because one group there's always going to be an out group, right? No matter what you decide there. And so to whom does our responsibility belong the most as Americans, right? Should it be other Americans or should it be people in another country?
Right. And I think that's part of the tension.
Yeah, for sure.
Part of the tension is having an immediate perspective of who are the people that we're ministering to.
Yeah.
You're ministering to 18 through 25-year-olds here, right, in SoCal. And on the other hand, I think the ethic needs to hold its water to be able to have consistency and a way of helping global flourishing as well. So there is tension there, admittedly. Now, so here's interesting. The second, I think, limitation that would come to me is how would you do this ministerially, like pastorally, right? You're like, hey, guys, it's legal. It's all good. Just make sure you don't pick up that blunt until you're 25.
Right. And this, for me, is where I probably come down as my ultimate answer, right? And this is why I don't think I can get behind the consumption of weed personally, right? And this is why I think we shouldn't take like an affirmative stance to just open usage of it, because particularly there's kind of two things that come to mind with this. I lean very heavily on the writings of Paul for my thinking here. So Paul talks about the idea of the weaker brother, right, in Romans 14, there, that if we do anything, we shouldn't do anything that causes our brother and sister to stumble. So I know for me, if people found out that as a pastor I smoked weed, it would decimate any credibility I had with a multiplicity of generations, right? It might make some of my 15-year-old students think I'm way cooler, for sure, but it'll wreck whatever credibility I have with their mom and dad, right? And so for me, it's important to keep that bigger picture in mind. Paul talks about a couple of things here, like because it's permissible doesn't mean it's beneficial, right? And so for me, the ultimate question of this ministerially is like, legality is actually pretty secondary in its nature compared to what I think Christ commands of me, which is like to be willing to give up all of my individual freedoms for the sake of the gospel. Things that I might be entitled to do. So legally, I am entitled to smoke weed, right? I'm a 30-year-old man. Like, it's legal here in California. I can go get a fake prescription from whatever bogus doctor, right, on Venice Beach. And I can go get some weed. But I think that's one of the least effective ways to live out a Christian witness, right? And that's why I don't. And so, legality is secondarily imported into the conversation because of what I think Christ calls and commands of me.
Good. So that's a fascinating curiosity then that we have here in this conversation. On the two sides, you have on the one hand the possibility of a Christian stance that would be okay or permissive in some ways of the decriminalization for the betterment of society, and on the other hand saying, but the legality of it actually isn't even the point.
Right. And I think that's an important juxtaposition to make, because again, like we were saying earlier, it is largely heart driven in the conversation, right? Like, I know people that smoke it that need it, right? That it's like genuinely keeping them alive and out of the hospital. And that's great. They don't abuse it. It is what it is for them. But for me, dude, could never and will never participate in that kind of world, because it's like, I don't want one thing I do to mess up any potential chance at having a witness or having a conversation that could help people say yes to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, that would get you written off from so many people so quickly.
It wouldn't be worth it.
But as a pastor, nobody expects me to smoke weed, right? So when, like, if I'm hanging out with somebody, they're like, hey, you want to, like, hit my vape pen? It's like, no, I'm good. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense because you are a pastor. And you're like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't need to try and break that. It's not a stereotype that's worth trying to break, right? In that kind of conversation or in that context.
Yeah.
And nobody's like, oh, dude, you're such a square. It's like, oh, okay.